372-1111 or text or WhatsApp 686-9999. If you're in the CNMI, please call 323-1113. Welcome everybody to Total Health.
Well, we are back with more Total Health. I am very excited for today's show. We have been planning that show for quite a number of months. And finally, we do have our professor from the University of Guam, Dr. Millie Nice. Actually, her name is Millie Lepojević. If you're wondering where that name comes from, she's Serbian, but I'll certainly let her introduce herself further. But Lepojević means nice, beautiful, and so in short, we call her Millie Nice. So Millie is not only a great person, not only a very educated professor, but she's also a great communicator. And no wonder, because she does specializes in communications. When I first heard that she is a professor in communication, I said, oh, really? Is that a discipline too? But as I am studying how to communicate better with my patients, I realize how important actually communication is. So Millie, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you, Elena. I feel blessed to be here with you, with your colleagues, Scott and Maverick, and I'm excited that finally our plans came true. We've been planning, as you said, this for months, but God had other plans. He needed other people to come to studio, so I'm really honored he wanted me to come in today.
I really wanted to have that talk with you because Millie is not only a great person, but she's also a dear friend of mine. And every time we do communicate, I believe our communication is quite healthy. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. And I was just, listening this introduction, amazing introduction you made. And you know what? If you ever decide to switch career, to leave your job at the clinic, I would be more than happy to have you as my public relation manager.
Oh, Millie. Oh, wow. Communication is a hard thing. And I'm saying it's a hard thing because many of us struggle with that. And actually, none of us has been born knowing how to communicate. Actually, we do need quite a lot. We have the need to talk to someone that really can help us and give us a guidance. Because most of the arguments, most of the problems, even family problems, are coming either because of lack of communication, or can I say over communication, or like in a way, like arguments, misinterpreting, what one wants to say, another wants to say. Then we ask a third person to tell us what actually the other person meant. And it becomes so difficult instead of like learning basic skills, or maybe we can advance in those skills and live in a very peaceful way while we're still here. Life is very short. And we complicated it quite a lot, sometimes because we don't know exactly how to do it, sometimes because we actually think we know how to do it, and certainly we need a guidance from you. So today's topic is not going to be about healthy communication or how to get the best information out of the doctor in a way that you understand it, but actually how we can use communication between us and others in order to enhance our health and stay healthy. Not to jeopardize our health, but to enhance it. In other words, we'll talk about social health. Our talk today is on social health and communications. So, Millie, you've spent some time studying communication. What triggered your interest in communications?
Wow, I didn't think we have enough time in one show to tell you all about it. But I think it's an essential life skill. Literally, like in a way how you learn CPR or things like that. Like it can, in certain situations, make a difference between life and death. And I would say probably that throughout my education and my family relations, I learned early on how essential it can be, how you can weather the storm if you can apply specific communication skills. And I learned then that by polishing them, I can achieve my goals. And I think that brings me back to what you just said, that communication is a skill. We don't come into this world with knowing how to communicate with others. It's something we learn over time. There are some parts of our communication that are inborn. And researchers was actually very interested to learn is there any part of communication that we are aware before even we start socially interacting with others? Like, do we have some pre-knowledge that before our mom and dad teach us that if we smile and we say please, we get what we want? And they did research on blind babies, on babies that were born blind.
Oh, wow.
Because they were unable to see how people react and they were unable to mimic their nonverbal communication. And they learned there are things in communication that are universal, that that we're born with. For example, smile.
Oh, wow.
Smile is something that we know to do instinctively. So baby, when she's happy or he's happy, they smile even when they're blind, and they were unable to learn that from mom and dad or other caregivers. However, some other skills we have to learn. And it's tough. I'm not going to lie. I teach this for years. I worked with so many students, some of them young, some of them adult, some of them older than me. And what I tell them usually at the very beginning is 80% of the people is afraid of communication, especially of public speaking, for example.
I think that's fear number one.
Yeah. When you take a look at the fears that Americans have, fear number one is, I think, fear of terrorism. Fear number two is fear of identity theft, which is, again, losing your life, basically. And fear number three is fear of public speaking.
Wow.
And when they ask you what's common for these things, it's basically fear of unknown. You don't know what might happen, how it might impact you. And I tell my students, those 80% of the people that fear the communication, those are the honest ones, because the remaining 20%, they lie.
Oh, wow.
Everyone is afraid. It's just a way for our body to tell us, look, you're about to do something important. You better stay on the alert. You better be your best self in this. And all our, organs, the whole system goes into this mode. Oh, I want to be my best self. And that's how we actually get to the fear response, right? And that comes down, that decreases as we practice. And that's why I insist, with my students, I tell them there are three important parts of communication, three phases that you need to really master. The first one is preparation, the second one is preparation, and the third one is preparation.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I guess you'll never outgrow this phase. You always prepare. So would you advise, we have so much to talk about it. I believe will be quite random, and it is important to talk about verbal versus non-verbal communication. But would you advise that we always prepare? Because there are some circumstances we can't prepare.
Okay, let me tell you, I have a PhD in communication. I'm teaching this at the college level for years. I've run my own company that was providing communication training. And to come into your show today, I was preparing for 2 hours.
Okay.
Yep. So that never stops. I think that's our way to say this is important to me, right? We teach kids that there are things that kind of hinder our communication, such as biases and stereotypes, assuming we know other based on their culture, based on their skin color, language, and so on. But let me tell you, there is one thing that hinders communication even more. That's something that's called simplicity bias. When people think communication is simple, it's easy. Oh. I'm just going to tell him what I need. I'm just going to tell her how I want to achieve this. And we don't think about other person's needs, about their goals, about what's for the highest good. How is this going to play out in our community? What are all possible consequences? We don't think about all of these things, and then something goes south in that communication, and we were like, oh, that other person was so wrong, they misjudged me, they treated me unfairly, and so on. But the thing is, we weren't prepared, because if we did, we would think about what could go wrong, and we would be ready to address that. Yeah, you're right. There are some situations where we cannot be prepared. That's something that's called a crisis communication.
Oh,
and, you don't always get to be ready for the earthquake coming and having to tell your children, grab your stuff when you're leaving the apartment and things like that. And we also train for that. Like how can you help yourself calm down, center yourself, get related to your higher power, to your God, and draw your sources, draw your strength from there to be able to really access all of your wisdom, all of your knowledge that you need to use in that specific situation.
Wow, there is so much in what you're saying. I'll just go back and then I will go forward with some of the thoughts you shared. So it is kind of those people that don't prepare, like me, sometimes doesn't come always as I wanted and expected. I just go on like previous glory. And of course, I do experience quite a lot of failures. And actually, failure is my best friend, I would say. And once I embrace the failure, then success follows for some reason. But I guess this is practice, right? It's preparation, going through those challenges. But communication, as you said, some people actually lie. Or can we put it like in a way that George Bernard Shaw says, the Nobel Prize winning playwright, he says, actually you create an illusion. The way how people want to accept it and embrace it. If you have heard, I'm sure you have, the great speeches of even Hitler and Stalin and Mussolini, when you read the way they speak to the public, it's like captivating. In a way, they really created an illusion of what they believed. Of course, it takes more than a skill to catch that, I believe, but you would tell me also how we can respond to that illusion. And actually, Gerald Ford, the former United States president, says that nothing in life is more important than the ability to communicate effectively.
Yeah, I agree with that. As I said, I believe that's essential life skill. And I want to go back to the idea of preparing or not preparing. In my classes with students, we always watch others, how they communicate. I play them speeches from famous people, for Navy SEAL commanders, from US presidents, from actresses, from professors, and the overall message behind that is no matter how much you prepared, you're never going to be perfect. And just accepting that before you go on stage, before you start your communication, before this mic becomes live, right? Knowing that your goal is not to be perfect. Your goal is to have this experience, if possible, help others through that experience and learn from it. So that next time you can even master some additional segment and so on. And that's a never-ending journey, right? Just having the experience, that's our goal. It's not to be perfect. If we are going with the aim of being perfect, we're setting ourselves for failure. And another thing is embracing, as you said, embracing that there's going to be things that you wished you did differently and you said differently, but acknowledging that, being honest with yourself and with with others, saying, yeah, that really wasn't my best self, and I wish I did differently. Having that honest talk with yourself, with God, with others, that's where we're heading, not being perfect.
This is so important, and actually this was one of the reasons I really realized how important healthy communications are, especially because of young people that are trying to be perfect in imperfect world. We'll continue on that thought, hold on your thought, just right after the break.
We are going into our first break. Give us a call with your health question on Guam, 671-472-1111. In the CNMI, 670-323-1113. You can text, WhatsApp, signal us, 671-686-9999. We'll be right back.
Life-changing music is here.
No matter where you are or what you're going through, you're not alone, and you can hear that in the music.
On Joy FM.
Every experience that you can have as a human being, there's going to be a song that can relate to that, and you're not alone. And, the Bible says to cry with those who cry, and sometimes just putting your arm around someone and saying, I understand what you're going through, can mean the world. And that's what I think happens a lot of times when people will turn on Christian radio, is they might just hear a song that hits them right where they're at.
We're Joy FM, family-friendly radio.
Si Joe Mossy, and thanks for listening to Total Health on Joy FM. We want to hear from you. Call in with your health-related questions at 472-1111. In Guam or in the CNMI, the number to call is 323-1113. Text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, back to the show.
before our break, we were talking about trying to be perfect and trying very hard in communication. I'm particularly concerned that nowadays our wonderful young people live in a different, in this illusional way, virtual lifestyle, if I can call it, living on their phones and being more comfortable communicating virtually than really face to face. But of course, you can't live completely virtually. You have to face people. You have to go and buy milk, bread. You have to meet people. You have to talk to them. And what young people are finding very hard, especially those that don't communicate much at home, they really find a lot of challenges communicating with others. Then they start feeling inadequate. They feel some sense of that they're lacking something, or they just don't know how to express it, or they might think other people are just not able to understand their needs. And we see a lot of exploding, if I can say, anxiety and depression among young people, just feeling inadequate. The social health certainly suffers. I see many patients that they're very young and they know what depression is and they know what anxiety is. And all that is because of this communication-miscommunication nowadays. I'm sure, Millie, you have something to say about it. I mean, how serious is that, the social health among our teenagers, and what can we do and how we can help them to be able to effectively communicate?
Yeah, it is a big problem nowadays. You recognize it very well, and I'm sure a lot of parents that are listening can relate to that easily. Before we go into what those children who experience that social anxiety and communication anxiety, what they can do, let us take a look for a moment at the people who have helped them create the idea that they need to be perfect. So people on social media who are presenting themselves as living ideal lives, having everything one can want for, having amazing relationships with their partners, with their children, with their parents, with colleagues, having all the material goods one can wish for, never being late, always having your hair perfectly done or your clothes ironed, and still being fully rested and smiled. I want us to understand them first, because they are the creators of this reality that children are entering when they're online, right? Let us ask ourselves, why are they doing that? What's their need? Their need is to present themselves as being perfect. When I see people talking to others, I usually talking about others, I usually understand that they're not talking about others, they're talking about themselves. We have only one voice, what it means. How we talk to others is the same way how we talk to ourselves, is the same way how we talk to God. We don't have different voices for that. So when I see a mom yelling at her kid in a supermarket, I know she uses that same voice when she's talking to herself. And I know she's using the same voice when she's addressing God. And at that moment, I cannot think, wow, what a terrible mom. She cannot control her emotions. I can only think, wow, I wish this mom finds a way to talk to herself in a more meaningful way. I wish this mom reconnects with God in a more meaningful way. So what I understand is that these people who are trying to present themselves as perfect are actually crying to have someone approve of them. Because the voice they're using when they talk to themselves is, I want to be perfect, I need to be approved, I need to be loved, I need to be understood, I need to be appraised for something, and so on. And until they get that, that need is not met. And children who are following them, who are buying this story, this virtual story, are actually providing that for them. So I think if we approach children in that way, if we explain them why are people presenting themselves that way, they can understand that it is an illusion. And they don't have to be angry with those people. They have needs in the same way as your kid or your neighbor or your patient have need, right?
But I think every time when somebody tries to meet that need, it's never enough. That's the problem. It's never enough if the whole island of Guam likes me. I want the whole United States, the whole world to like me. And just when, even the Bible says, when you invest in your flesh, in the desires of your heart and in the lusts of your flesh, the more you want of that, there is never end to it. You keep on wanting and wanting more and more, and you doesn't seem to get satisfied.
As long as it's on a human level, it's never, ever going to be enough.
Right?
That's why we cannot live without spirituality. That's why, because that approval comes from the above, that acceptance, that unconditional love. There's only one place where we can meet that.
So do you think that for us, in order to communicate effectively, we have to have some dose of acceptance of ourselves, that we will not be perfect and only God is perfect?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, we're setting ourselves to fail.
I couldn't agree with you more. I used to work in a unit with eating disorders. We don't find as many eating disorders in Guam, or we don't talk about them, because the culture does not really promote you talking about it, but they are. When I was working in that unit, I remember one time the girls that are trying to be perfect, that are trying to be skinny, that are avoiding food to be in this perfect shape that they can stay as beautiful as long as they can. 3 of them came to me, and they said, "Miss Elena, we would like to tell you one thing." I said, "What is it?" "You are perfect." And they were like expecting me to really shine and say, "Oh wow, thank you for finding me perfect." I was so, I took it in such a bad way. I'm like, no way, I am not perfect, and I do not wish anybody to see me perfect. And with time I realized there is no perfection in us. There is none. I mean, the only one perfect we know is God. And God has quite a lot of empathy and sympathy to us, because he understands we are not. As you said, when you look at the mom and she doesn't, she doesn't have this nice self-talk to herself. It is the same way that God sees us. He sees us as children, and he loves us not because we are perfect. He is not going to reward us in life because we are perfect, we're doing something perfectly, but because he loves us.
Yeah.
Right?
And in a way, it's kind of relieving that we are not perfect. We will never be able to be perfect. Once we accept it, it's like, oh, thank you. I don't have to strive for that. I know that there are limits to my capacities, and there are things that I can do only through you and through your will, right? I want to go to the Exodus and the story of Moses, when God asks him to do and say certain things, and he says, "Oh God, no, I'm not really an eloquent person. Please find someone else." And actually, I think I prepared. Let me go back to that part. Moses says to Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." And Moses recognizes his imperfection. He is embracing it. He is so humble, and he's saying, "Please, just find someone else." But God will not let him have it. The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouth? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." That's Exodus chapter 4, verses 10 and 11. And Moses still tries to negotiate, and then Lord, just says, the Moses said, like, maybe my brother and so on. And I mean, I'm quite sure everyone who listens knows the rest of the story. What I'm trying to say is that Moses in this story was very weak until God said to him, "I'm the one who will do the work. I just need you to trust me and be there as basically my tool, the tool that I will speak through." And that's something that can empower us when we're afraid to communicate, when we're afraid to speak up, when we're afraid to say something or ask for something. We can ask ourselves, who could help us with this? And I'm sure the answer is easy.
Right, following that example of Moses, he wasn't able to communicate effectively, but that didn't stop him because God was with him. So even though we are not perfect in our communication, can we perfect it, Millie? Or can we continue working on our communication?
Yeah, absolutely. As we said at the beginning, communication is a skill. In Proverbs, it says basically words are like bullets. Proverbs 18. Verse 21 says, the tongue has the power of life and death,
Wow.
right? So, for example, for ammunition, we go to the training to learn how to use it. So if words have that power, and let's go to the beginning of the Bible or to John chapter 1. At the beginning, there was a word. God said this, and that was done, right? So the words have the power to create the word. If that's the power of the word, why wouldn't we go to the training to learn how to use it? If it can kill, why don't we learn
Or it can
how,
save,
or it
right?
can save life? Why don't we learn to use it?
Right, in the beginning was the word.
Yeah, that's my favorite verse in the whole Bible. You know, when you read the Bible as a communication professor, you're quite biased.
I think you're right. Actually, we got a caller and we got a very interesting question. I actually would like to ask that question as if it comes from me, because I'm one of those people that interrupt others when they talk. And in different cultures, that is really viewed in a very, very bad way. You know, we're both coming from, this part of Europe that we're very direct and we need to make our point across and we need to make them listen to us. So the question of the caller is, from WhatsApp, how can we refrain from cutting off a person from talking?
Okay, excellent question. Thank you for that one. I'm sure many others might have had the same question in their head, but they didn't text us. Let me first go back to the cultural differences that you mentioned. So I came here to Guam 2 years ago, hopefully to stay if God will have me here. And, I brought all my European training and knowledge here. And I remember few weeks into coming to church here, I was talking to a man in the church after the service, and he would talk to me and look me in the eyes, and every few seconds he would start looking down to the ground. And after like 5 or 6 times doing that, I kept thinking he must have lost something. So I would start looking to the ground myself, looking, what is it that he's trying to find? And then there was nothing. He would just return his eye contact to me. And after a while, I was like, can you tell me, is there a problem why you're not looking at me all the time when we're talking? And then he explained it's considered rude to look someone consistently in their eyes. And it was quite a surprise for me because where we come from, you and I, that's a sign of respect, of paying attention, of being attentive and, very willing and committed to the communication process. However, in here, it can be a sign of disrespect or of kind of showing that you're thinking very high of yourself, higher than the other person.
I see. Wow, that's so interesting. I honestly have not noticed it, or now I understand why my patient don't always look at me in my eyes. Wow, Millie.
Let's answer the question to the point after the music break.
Right?
Call in with your question on Guam 671-472-1111 and the CNMI 670-323-1113. Text WhatsApp signal 671-686-9999. We're streaming live on Facebook, so go ahead and leave your comment in the comment section below. We'll be right back.
At Joy FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Total Health on Joy FM. Call in with your health-related questions to 472-1111 in Guam. If you live in the CNMI, we want to hear from you too. Call 323-1113 or text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, here's more Total Health.
Okay, Millie, we're halfway of our show. We kind of want to hear everything from you that you have studied for so many years. We need to hear it within 1 hour. And we understood what communication is, what communication is not, that we can't be perfect. We can still need to work on that. But our caller is very right. What can we do in order to, not show that rudeness when somebody talks? How we can refrain from cutting them off?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it's impacting not only the person who is cutting off, but also someone who is talking, right? So I'm quite sure our listeners know the term active listening, but I think that term, that phrase is like so worn out maybe that people just had enough of, active listening. But I think we can also find verses in Bible that support the idea that communication is also in silence, right? We pray, we ask things from God, and then what do? Do we just wrap up and, go to our daily work? Or do we stay in silence to hear God's answer? And if we go with that, just imagine that that's how we communicate with others. As I said, we don't have multiple voices, we have one voice. So how we relate to others, that's how we relate to ourselves and God as well. If we interrupt others, there is a great possibility we're probably cutting off when God talks. I mean, God talks in multiple ways, of course, not just through words, but also through impressions, through guidance, and so on. So do we pause to get that answer from Him? That's something we can ask ourselves. On a more practical level, if you're catching yourself cutting off others, for example, when you speak to them on the phone, there is a small trick. I advise people to have a mirror in front of them when they talk. And if you see yourself with your mouth half open while other person is talking, that means you're already in the mode, okay, as soon as they stop to catch a breath, I'm going to slide in and say something. That is not an example of active listening. So you want to see yourself in the mirror with your mouth closed, with your ears open, with your eyes open if you're on a Zoom call, for example. Because we cannot only listen with our ears. We need to listen with our eyes, with our intuition, with our feeling. Like someone might be telling us, oh, it's nothing, I'm feeling fine. And yet their nonverbal presentation is telling us they are in despair. Right? They need help, they need support, they need love, whatever one might communicate through their facial expressions, body expression, and so on. So you can think of it as a game, seeing what's going to happen if you allow that person to continue talking until they feel finished. And not just jump in to say, yeah, I had the same experience. I know how that feels. I can relate. Because that's not really doing anything for the person you're talking with.
It's not validating.
It's not validating. But saying something when they really naturally pause, saying something, wow, it sounds like you had a tough day. Do you want to tell me more about it? And you'll discover that if you do that, if you really listen and take your role as a listener at that moment in the communication, it will be more meaningful than if you spend next 10 minutes talking.
Right, if you put the others first, I think communication will become more like easier to follow. But if you think about yourself when the other person thinks, then miscommunication happens, or the others can perceive that actually their story does not matter to you. Yeah. And talking about social health, and I hope that was a very good answer, by the way. I think I cut off even when God talks to me, and I'm certainly gonna try to listen actively to God and others. So talking about social health, we know that our best communication and our worst communication happen in the family. We kind of think that we know the others. We presume what the others will say or do. And there is so much hurt that has been done even within the family. When I talked to my sister last radio show, she told me things that I have told her that hurt her so deeply, and I was never even aware of that. And we all carry with us our hurts from our families, things that people had told us, you're not good at that, you can never amount to that, and things we carry for the rest of our life, trying to fight those cognitive distortions, trying to find this identity that the others are giving us. How can we communicate, Millie, better in our families?
Wow, we will need to come together once per week for the next 4 months to answer that question. But to try to summarize my answer, yes, the primary communication that occurs in our life is so essential, and we learn so much from that, right? It models the way other communication is later on established in our life. And yeah, there are some moments that are specifically hard and they shape us, right? We hold a grudge against that person or against that moment about something that was very hurtful for us. Maybe in that moment when we were little, we didn't even realize how hurtful it was. But later on, as grown-ups, we see and we are able to connect the dots from the past. No, we cannot go to the past. That's bad news. We cannot go to the past. We cannot change those things. So the sooner we accept that, the easier the rest of the journey is going to be for us. And when I say accept, I want to make a significant distinction that when we accept that something happened, we're not supporting what happened. We're just coming to the point saying, okay, this is my starting point. This is where I'm going to start working from. That doesn't mean I approve of what happened. That doesn't mean I support for this to continue happening or that I endorse it in any way. No, but I'm accepting that it happened and it shaped me. Once we start accepting it, amazing things happen. I see you smiling, so I'm sensing that you know what I talk about. And then the other thing is that helps students I work with and some patients is that thinking, yeah, I was wronged. Someone was unjustice to me. But is there any chance that I used that in some good way in my life? That it just wasn't for nothing? That it wasn't just a traumatic event. It wasn't just some hurtful thing someone was saying to me. But when that influenced me, when that shaped me, was there any good in that? To give you an example, my family always interrupted me when I was little. What good I got from that is that I learned to speak fast and very efficient.
Also, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I cannot change the fact that I was interrupted, but I can see how can that play out well in my life. There is this sentence I usually force my students to write down. That's how important I think it is. You have to look for the good. You have to look for the good in people you talk to, because there is something good in every single person. In that person that hurted you the most, there are good things, because that person is someone else's best friend, someone else's great father or sister, and so on. There is something good and amazing in mass murderer. If you are unable to find it, and this is the sentence I ask my students to write down, if you are unable to find it, it's not up to the person or the situation, it's up to you. You didn't look carefully enough. And you're not the one to judge at the end of the day if someone's good or bad. There is someone else whose judgment is expected, right? And I compare that with losing your keys. To give you an example, it's morning, you're late for your work, and you just cannot find your car keys. Right? And you're looking in your purse, in your other purse that you had the other day, in your pockets, in the pockets of the stuff you wore the whole previous week, and you cannot find them. What do? Do you just give up and say, okay, I lost my car keys, I will never drive my car again? Or you say, I know it's somewhere. I'm just continue looking for it. And then you start opening the fridge. Maybe you've put it in the fridge. You start going through your cat's sand, checking out if the cat stole it and buried it in the sand, because you know it's there, right? Jesus tells us, don't give up on anyone. The Bible is teaching us that. If you stop looking, you've given up. That's how I see it. I'm sorry, I'm not competent to give a Bible study. I'm just relaying my own view. So if we give up on finding what was hurtful, how did that serve us? Was there any way how we can use it for our benefit? We have given up on finding good. And we don't serve ourselves well then, right? We cannot change the history. We cannot undo the hurtful stuff. But we can see, how can we use it? Someone who was told their whole life they're not worthy, they will never accomplish anything. Yeah, that stuff hurts. That stuff leaves deep, deep marks. But maybe that helped you finish your school because you just wanted to prove that they are wrong. Maybe that was your motivation, the fuel you needed.
Wow. You're making me speechless. You know, when
And
you
that's not easy.
when you speak truth, it kind of disarm the others. And the Bible in Ephesians says, speak the truth with love. I believe if we were able to communicate effectively, many wrong things wouldn't have been done. Many mass murders could have been really prevented. If we are really actively listening to the others of others, we could have amounted to so much good.
Yeah.
Right. So, Millie, wow, there is so much to learn. And all of us, we're babies when it comes about communication. But we have seen many forms of unhealthy communication. I think we can recognize those. Like, we can't verbalize exactly what's right and what's wrong with an unhealthy communication, but we have seen people being passionate, accusative, argumentative, and the best thing that we do is like either not to argue back because we don't see the point, or just, leaving the room and going somewhere else. What is unhealthy communication? What do we do with it?
There's so many examples of unhealthy communication. I would say it's probably prevalent in today's society, and it's easier to learn unhealthy communication than healthy. So how to go about that? My advice is to try to look for the advices of healthy communication, to examples of healthy communication, to look for people who communicate with compassion, with empathy, with love, with respect and support as their basic goal. Not with their basic goal being, I want to convince you in my truth. I want to convince you in what I think is right, and I want you to achieve my goals for me. So unhealthy communication is everything opposite of that, right? Communication where priorities are distorted, where you think that only one side can accomplish their goals instead of thinking how both sides can come to the common ground. Where you're judged, where you are seeing some defenses coming up so that you don't have to deal with the real issue, then some manipulation, criticism. That doesn't mean you cannot say what bothers you, but if you're blaming others for everything that's wrong in your life, that's an example of unhealthy communication. So my question is, if we think of how we want to I guess we'll continue after the music.
But finish your thought.
I just want to say, if we want to think who was the best communicator we know.
Wow.
Let's look how Jesus did things. How was he talking to people with love, with compassion, with symbols, with getting to the level that he knew they will understand?
We are going into our third break. We got less than about 16 minutes left, or maybe 15 minutes left. Give us a call with your question on Guam, 671-472-1111, and the CNMI 670-323-1113. You can text WhatsApp signal 671-686-9999. We're streaming live on Facebook. Go ahead and leave your comments in the comments section below. We'll be right back.
Okay, time for some honest talk to you men. When you need to change your spark plugs, you don't do that with your bare hands, you use a socket wrench. When you need to fix a leaky toilet, you won't get that pipe loose with your bare hands. You know that jobs need the right tools. So what about your relationship with your wife and kids? Are you trying to handle that with your bare hands? You have enough sense to use tools for physical jobs, but when it comes to things of the heart, we men sort of wing it. Well, it's time to start using some tools in your relationship just like you would anything else that's important to you. Tool number 1, fact-finding. When your wife talks, first listen. Let her know that you heard what she's saying. Don't think she's hinting for you to fix something. Tool number 2, ask for help. Hey, if you're in in over your head in your garage, you might grab one of your neighbors to help out. But when it comes to needing help in relationships, men are very reluctant to ask for help from a pastor or a counselor or even a friend. Relationship Tools for Men from the book Men's Relational Toolbox from Gary, Greg, and Michael Smalley.
From Joy FM.
And we're back with more Total Health. Give us a call with your medical questions. Number to call in Guam is 472-1111. If you're in the CNMI, the number to call is 323-1113. Or you can text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. Now back to the program.
Millie, you're right that the greatest example that it has given to us is God, Jesus. You know, many times he wasn't even speaking. You know, he would just not say anything because he knew that if he says the truth, some people are not ready to accept it. And while there are very many examples of a good communication, there are also many examples of unhealthy communication. And for those of us that we do have some unhealthy, behaviors, what would be the first steps of us, how we can break those habits, please give us some tips of how we can break the healthy communication and have healthy instead.
So, as you said at the beginning, our communication patterns are formed in our childhood because we were observing and soaking in. So, I would first say expose yourself now to a different model, right? Expose yourself to a good model. Is it a Bible study? Is it watching TED Talk? Is it whatever it is that will expose you daily to a certain amount of time of healthy communication, and your subliminal mind will soak that in. It will take about a month or so for you to start recognizing that your patterns of responses are changing. Another thing is, I think even already in your question at the beginning, you said Jesus sometimes didn't answer to something because he knew people would not be able to understand the truth at that moment. And I think that's like you've managed to give us almost a definition of good communication in there. So the definition of communication, there are like thousands of communication definitions, but the one I love most because it's so simple says the communication is a process of sending message from the sender to the receiver through a channel, for example, through this radio, with the idea of the receiver being able to decode or understand the message. So, for example, if I were to say, daj mi čašu vode, that's not communication, right? Because I just spoke in Serbian. Yeah, you did, because you can understand my mother tongue. But for our listeners, that's not communication because that last part of definition is missing. They are unable to understand it. So unhealthy communication is the communication where the sender, either consciously or subconsciously, is making the receiver not being able to understand the message. Sometimes even blaming them for not understanding that message, right? So the first step for us is to recognize when it's happening, right? I sometimes invite my students to ask themselves, how old is really this person I'm talking to right now? Sometimes what you see in front of you is a 35-year-old man or woman, and who is talking to you is their inner child who is 6.5, who was hurt by something in their childhood, and you just stepped on that triggering memory. You've just revoked that memory, and they are acting and responding to you as a 6.5-year-old one. And you're thinking to yourself, how is this person so unreasonable? And they're actually very reasonable for the age of 6.5, right? So going there and thinking, what is it? As you said, as Jesus did, what is it that this person can now comprehend? How much of communication they can accept, and adjusting our message to that. We cannot blame them for being emotionally incapable to get the whole message, right? And then the second thing is, and I think Jesus did that a lot, is storytelling. Storytelling is basically telling stories, and I think that's a great format when we think what do we read to our kids when they're little before the bedtime? Do we open encyclopedia and read encyclopedia, or do we read a bedtime story? We read a story, and our mind is wired to like that format, to like the stories. So if we start by telling the story about how we feel and what do we need,
indirectly,
without blaming the other person for it, right? Saying, I just feel unappreciated at the moment. I would really need some love, maybe.
Millie, what do we do with people that we try to convey a message and they're not getting it? That causes us a lot of frustration from that communication. Like, do we leave them aside? How do we make our point across? Or is it because we just don't have connection with that person at that time?
It might be. I believe that the relationship is more healing than any content of the message. So once person is able to accept you as someone they can appreciate and value, they will be getting closer to the message. But when our message is unable to go through, I want us to go back to the idea that sometimes we put the seed in and the plant will grow only in 5 to 10 years. Sometimes it grows in 5 minutes, sometimes in 5 months, sometimes in 5 years, sometimes in 5 decades. So knowing that frustration that we feel comes from our impatience to see the fruits of what we have planted. The frustration is not because the other person is resistant or stupid or however we want to call them at that moment of our frustration. It's because we are so impatient. So again, going back to God, who is so patient with us, if we're asking for His forgiveness, for His patience, there is a beautiful part of the prayer which says, I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm having that in Serbian in my head, but it says, and forgive us as we forgive others. And I've repeated that prayer so many times in my life before it hit me one day, saying, how can I ask to be forgiven when I'm holding a grudge against so many people? I will never be forgiven if I don't start working on this, right? So just going back again to us, what's our role in that? What's our share of responsibility? What is it that we can do? And what we can't, leave it to the one who can.
Wow. Again, another moment in which I have to pause and I have to gather my mind because it's just so much truth spoken in such concentrated way and it's so impactful. Well, it's true. We are very impatient. When we talk, we kind of want to be heard. It's very difficult for us to listen. Or maybe instead of asking you how we can communicate effectively, what can we do to listen actively? Are there any tricks, any tips, anything else you can really teach us how to improve
my
this
biggest
communication?
trick is try it out.
Okay.
Try it out. Give yourself a week and say, I'm going to commit to a lot of silence in my communication and just ask, the prompting questions like, oh, can you help me understand that? Can you tell me more about it? I'm interested to learn more about what made you feel that way. And see how you feel after a week of doing that. Does it feel better if you're constantly talking? Or do you feel you've connected better with people if you've asked some genuine questions?
Wow.
Because when you do that, so I'm not saying forget about your needs, whatever you needed, forget about it. What I'm saying is try to see how it feels for you. Because when you start doing that, the people will respond to that. And that's how the magic happens, right? We cannot receive things that we didn't give to others. Right? We have to give to be able to receive. So if we give others compassion and listening ear, that's what's going to come back to us.
Yeah, it says coming together is a beginning, keeping together is a progress, and working together is a success. I have to admit that for many years I have been trying to be so independent that I kind of lost a lot of the skill to talk to others. And, when I realized that success, it can get you to individual to a certain point, but if you embrace others and their ideas, wow, you can reach even higher dimensions. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And I started appreciating the fact that no person is, an island. You need more in order to make this life more meaningful and meaningful to others. And I learned and I started actually looking at others more than looking to my own needs. And when I forget about my own needs, this is when other people benefit and they actually can, satisfy my needs. If I take care of you and you take care of me, it'll be such a wonderful world.
Yeah.
That's why Jesus says, deny yourself. Don't put yourself first. Just deny yourself and follow me. And God does the same. See, he does everything for you. He sacrificed himself so he can satisfy your needs. So we will never satisfy maybe our needs by working on our needs, but when working to others for their needs, and they would work for our needs. Is this what communication is all about?
It is. It's so beautiful way how you've put it. And I put that in a chart for my students because we live in goal-oriented society. The first assignment I give them is I make a column and I tell them, okay, what's your goal here? For example, let's say you want to communicate to your parents that you want to study off island. You don't want to go to college here. You want to go to the mainland. What's your goal? What's your key point number 1, 2, 3? And I break it down for them. And they do that marvelously. And they think, okay, I've did it. I'm going to get an A. And then I open the other column from that. And I ask them, what are the goals of the person that you're going to talk to? What are going to be their key messages? What are the needs that you need to meet for them to feel heard, to feel appreciated? And I can see in their eyes every semester, they're like, oh, but we thought that we finished the assignment when we did the first column, right? And then I actually make them think about how they can help the other person meet their goal, the person B's goal. Because once we help them meet their goal, they will help us meet ours.
Well, Millie, we have 1 second to share one more thing from you and one more thing from me. That was a great talk. I would just say that Jesus advised us that if it is possible, as much as depends on us, to live peacefully with all men. I understood we need to connect with them, we need to understand them, and we need to work towards improving our connection with them.
Well, my final thought is that was an amazing ending. If I can add just one more thing to it, is that God gave us His Word. Word is so special. Word is our connection with God. Word has such a great power. So let's honor it. Let's use it wisely.
To communicate effectively.
Yes,
Thank
with
you.
love and compassion.
And in truth. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Millie, and thank you, Elena. And thank you for the topic. It was a real blessing for me, and I know the listeners was blessed as well. Tune in next Wednesday for more Total Health.
Be sure to check with your doctors before making any sudden life changes discussed today. Total Health is brought to you in partnership with Guam Seventh-day Adventist Clinic, where health is their mission. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you and si Juas Masi for listening to Total Health right here on Joy FM.